Hey guys, Ben here from Velflex. Now, we've just had a really good question that we want to answer. When do you use a blocker with our Ultracolor transfers? Now, guys, we have 3 blockers, okay? So this is really important. We have a dye blocker, we have a sub-blocker, sublimation blocker, okay? Sub-blocker for short, and then soft shell blocker. And in that order, dye, sub-blocker, soft shell is how strong that blocker is, okay? How good it is at stopping the dye. Now guys, for most of our customers, they're buying a dye blocker, okay? And a dye blocker is a bit of an insurance policy. It's for the businesses who have previously bought transfers and it's going onto a dyed garment, typically speaking dyed polyesters, because cotton fabric holds its dye really, really well. But polyesters, synthetics and things like that, if it's a high percentage of polyester, like 70% plus, and it was a red or a purple or a black, customers in the past have found that if they press a normal Ultracolor transfer onto a dyed polyester, okay, that they might do 10 jobs like that and 1 or 2 of them will bleed through. Okay, it's not a given it'll bleed every time. Some people have been really lucky, but for some people, they've pressed normal transfers onto a dyed polyester or a dyed synthetic, and the color has migrated through and discolored their transfer. So guys, we've created the dye blocker. It's for these customers who want an insurance policy, who want to make sure that the transfer has a blocker behind it, has plenty of white. We do an extra layer of white behind the transfer as well, so it's got a really nice white layer, and then it's got the blocker ink behind it, and that stops any discoloration from a dyed garment, okay? And most people are buying this one if they want that assurance policy where they know no dye migration whatsoever. It doesn't matter what any polyester, dyed polyester, okay? And it's not gonna migrate through. Now guys, going up the scale, we've got a sub blocker, okay? Sublimation blocker. Now this sort of blocker is put onto transfers that's going onto a sublimated polyester. Think of sportswear, okay? Think of your AFL, the NRL, think of all of the sportswear that you see right from grassroots up. For the most part, it's made using sublimation printing on fabric, okay? And the way you can tell that is the fabric is, typically it's bright colors, right? With logos and things like that on it. But also, most importantly, you'll know is if you flip the fabric over, it's white on the inside, but full color on the outside of the shirt. The only way you achieve that is using sublimation printing. Now, sublimation printing, guys, is done onto the fabric using heat and pressure, okay? It's an amazing process. If you want to have a look, YouTube sublimation printing, and there'll be heaps of videos there on how things are printed using sublimation. But what's really important for you to know here is garments that are sublimation printed, it's done with heat and pressure. That's the same process that we're going to use to apply a transfer. So if we take a transfer and we put it onto a sublimated garment, then we're kind of reactivating the inks in the original fabric, okay, under the transfer. So the likelihood of the migration is much higher. In actual fact, it's almost guaranteed, okay? So guys, if you're going onto a sublimated fabric, and it's a light coloured transfer and the sublimation fabric is quite dark or bright, you would need the second of our blockers, that sublimation blocker, or sub-block for short. That's really important, okay? The third blocker that we have is our soft shell blocker. Now, soft shell blocker, it's the strongest of the lot, and it's designed for putting onto the back of a transfer. It's got to go onto a soft shell jacket, okay? Soft shell jackets, it's not neoprene, but it's really nice and soft, okay? It's that wet weather sort of jacket, the water beads off it. Usually it's in a navy or a black. I've seen them in maroon as well, but navy's the typical colour. And they're usually very dark garments, okay? Soft shell fabrics migrate terribly. Like they always will migrate, okay? Doesn't happen immediately though as well. So if I had a soft shell jacket and I pressed a transfer on it, it will look fine for a few weeks. But in a few weeks' time, if you don't have a blocker on there, in a few weeks' time, the dye from the soft shell fabric will migrate through the actual transfer and start to show up. It almost looks a little bit like mold, okay? And it looks really quite weird. You'll never see anything like it except for soft shell dye migrating through the transfer. We have that third blocker, the soft shell blocker, the strongest of the lot, okay? it is good enough to go onto the back of a transfer and stop that dye coming through from the soft shell. So guys, we have 3 blockers: dye blocker, sub blocker, okay, soft shell. The dye blocker is the one that most of our customers are buying for uniforms and things like that, because most of the time it's going on to a dyed polyester sort of garment or a dyed synthetic, and they're just wanting to make sure that there's no chance of dye migration, okay? The sublimation blocker is for anybody doing sublimated garments. Most of the time, this is in the sportswear industry that we're doing sublimated transfers for, sub-block transfers for. That's sportswear, grassroots, right through to the numbers that we do for the AFL or the NRL, the A-League soccer. They all have a sub-blocker on the back of them to make sure that the garments don't discolour the numbers, okay? And we can do it for all your sponsors' logos and the whole works as well. And then that third one, the soft shell. Guys, that's when you use a blocker. If you're going onto a cotton t-shirt or a cotton garment, natural fabrics tend to hold they cure the dye really, really well, and you don't typically get the dye bleeding. So we only say, really, it's those 3 types, and the dye being for dyed synthetics, dyed polyesters. Hope that helps, guys. It's Ben from Velflex, and that's when to use a blocker